16 starts and sits for week 7. We got every single position for you today. We are going to make sure that you walk out of week 7 with that dub. We're going to go quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So Tyler, why don't you kick us off with your start of the week at the quarterback position?
It's Kirk O'Chains. It's Captain Kirk. We're going with Kirk Cousins this week. And when you take a look at Kirk's season so far, outside of the Tampa game where he put up 500 yards, you'd think that he would be an easy sit here just because he's averaging just 11.7 fantasy points per game outside of the Tampa game, obviously, with only one top 10 finish. But this matchup this week against Seattle could be fireworks, could be another just barn burner of a game. Tied for the highest point total of the week with 51.5 points. This Seattle defense over the last 3 weeks, they have not been playing as well as they started out this year. They are second in yards allowed per game in that stretch, and both Seattle and Atlanta are top 12 in points allowed as well. So I'm expecting, again, fireworks. I'm expecting a high-scoring game, and we were chatting about this game earlier too. This game could also just be like a 17-14, 17-10 game. But I think just the way the defenses have been trending for both of these teams, also with these offenses as well, I'm expecting a high-scoring game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a benefit as a home game as well for Atlanta, getting to play in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And for Kirk, it really comes down to, do you think he can throw for multiple touchdowns, right? Because Kirk was never a ground threat, and now coming off the Achilles tear, he has -7 rushing yards on the season. So, right, you don't get that rushing boost you get with a lot of these other guys. And so it's, can he throw? If he throws 2+ touchdowns, he's going to probably get you 18+ points. And in a game, like you said, with the highest point total of the week, that feels like something, you know what, I can kind of get behind of. This could be Kirk's game, because if he gives you 250 and 2, you're sitting 18+ points. You're feeling pretty good about your week. So I agree. I think Kirk is definitely a start. My start of the week, you know, I don't want to say it's cheating. I hope it's not, but I'm gonna go with Baker Mayfield at this point. The dude has just been on fire as of late. He's the quarterback 2 in fantasy football right now. He gets the Ravens, and I know every time we see the Ravens, every time we see the Steelers, we always think scary defense, stay away. And while the Ravens are scary in the run game, in the passing game, they're allowing just shy of 300 passing yards a game. And this Bucs team has put up points this season as well. 37, 20, 26, 33, 36, and 51 in the first 6 weeks are the point totals they've put up. Baker has scored 23 points in 3 straight games. He's had either 3+ touchdowns or 300 yards in each game, and he's had one with both, which was last week when they put up 51. So do I think they're going to put up 51 again? No. Would I be shocked if they're putting up less than probably 3 touchdowns? Yeah, I'd be a little bit surprised. And so I'm going in on Baker. This Ravens run defense is no joke. Dude's got 15 passing touchdowns in the season right now. So yeah, I'm pushing in Baker. I'm pushing him in over guys like Patrick Mahomes. I'm pushing him in. I don't want to spoil it, but Brock Purdy, I'm pushing him in over. So I'd have full confidence in Baker this week.
I absolutely do as well, because again, this matchup, if Atlanta and Seattle isn't a barn burner, this is the game that I expect it to be, just because both offenses are putting up a ton of points right now. And again, like you said at the top too, Baltimore's defense this year, at least against the pass, is not as good as we remember it being. I have a ton of faith in Baker this week. I've got him as my quarterback 9 on the week. Like I'm very much a Baker fan this week against the Ravens.
Yeah. And Ty, I know this pains you to say it. Your quarterback sit. I know it hurts deep down. So I won't say anything else. I'll just give you your time to explain your quarterback sit for week 7.
I don't really want to talk about it because it makes me so sad. Yeah, Anthony Richardson is a sit again. The injury, sure, but it's really the matchup here. You're going up against Miami. I have just no interest in that at all. Miami is allowing the third fewest passing yards per game on the year, the fewest touchdowns allowed through the air as well. They're bottom 10 in completion percentage. So we're taking an already inefficient passer with a very good pass defense. I'm just not interested. Yeah, the rushing upside will always be there. That will always give you some kind of intrigue for starting a guy like Anthony Richardson. But again, I just think there's so many things working against Richardson, right? His injury, the matchup, who knows how healthy his receivers are. We thought Downs and Pittman were going to be out last week. They ended up playing. Who knows how healthy they will be. And Jonathan Taylor will likely be back as well. So you would think full strength offense for the Colts. The matchup tells me just stay away from it.
Yeah. So Jonathan Taylor did not practice today. So does that change your outlook on Anthony Richardson if Taylor plays versus doesn't play, or are you just, I need to see a week from him back before I trust him?
Maybe there's a little more interest then, just because the question really the question really is, how often do we think Indy will be in scoring positions against Miami this week? I'm not so sure. I mean, we saw what happens against a good run defense last week in Tennessee. They only put up 20 points. Now, granted, that was Flacco, but I think still there's, at that point, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't play, I'm still not like convinced that like Anthony Richardson suddenly becomes like a great play or just a solid play at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I think I just need 1 week just to make sure they're not conservative with him running the ball. Because if they're conservative with him running the ball, I don't want any part of Anthony Richardson. My sit of the week is it's Brock Purdy this week. And I don't say this to try and convince you that Brock Purdy's bad or Brock Purdy's going to have a really bad game. But Purdy is either had under 16 fantasy points or he's thrown for 3+ touchdowns. And they play Kansas City this season, who's only allowed 7 passing touchdowns on the year. So I just don't think Brock Purdy is going to be throwing a lot of passing touchdowns in this one. That's really what it comes down to. We just don't see the scrambling ability from Purdy. He's got 26 carries for 127 yards on the season. So maybe he gets you 2 fantasy points on the ground this game. That's kind of what he's averaging. But in a game where I think Kansas City is going to force them to beat them on the ground, especially with Jordan Mason being questionable this week, I just don't see him really scoring really more than 1. Maybe he gets 2 passing touchdowns through the year.
Yeah. So when you take a look at just all the quarterbacks that are playing this week, really you've got your top 9, right? Lamar, Daniels, Hurts, Allen, Burrow, Kyler, Love, Stroud, and I would throw Baker into that kind of tier of like, you feel good about these guys.
Yes.
But then it goes, you got guys like Kirk. I would throw Purdy in there, Geno, Richardson, Mahomes, Darnold, and Goff. That's 7 guys that you can definitely see them succeeding or having a very good week, but you also see them potentially like busting out just because obviously it's just not a high scoring game or whatever the reason may be. So I think that's part of the reason why, again, like Richardson was a sit for me. Purdy's a sit for you. You may end up having to play one of those guys, and you may think that, again, like Kansas City, San Francisco could be a high scoring game as well. Sure. I would entertain an argument for that. I think we would just probably look elsewhere in that group of quarterbacks, just because we see question marks with our sets.
Yeah. And I think too, Andy Reid with a week to plan, I wouldn't underestimate him. He's coming off the bye week. He's been planning for San Francisco for 2 weeks. I got to imagine they're going to throw a lot of things their way. All right, Ty, let's go on to our running back starts. And again, I'm just so happy. Anytime we get to talk about this guy, so unbelievably happy. So why don't you take it away with your running back start for this week?
I love J.K. Dobbins this week. Like you said, anytime we get to talk about J.K. Dobbins, it just brightens my day, honestly. I mean, for all that he's gone through and how he's looked this year, it's incredible. But taking a look at this week, it is a Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman offense against Arizona. Does that not do you not understand already what the Chargers will probably want to do in this game? They will probably just want to get the ball on the ground because Lord knows Arizona is not really stopping anybody on the in the run game at this point. They are allowing the 5th highest yards per carry. They are 1st in yards per game. The one pushback that I think people could have is, well, we saw Kamani Vidal last week. He was most people's favorite kind of deeper league stash, waiver ad this week because he caught a 30-yard touchdown on a wheel route. Ladies and gentlemen, hear it from me, hear it from Cam as well. That's not happening every single week. That is just right place, right time. The dude is just not a threat yet to Dobbins in this backfield. And just to further kind of push the point there, Vidal only played 19 snaps to Dobbins' 57. He's not a threat. This is Dobbins' backfield with a great matchup. Yeah, I've got him as my running back 12 on the week. Sky's the limit here.
Like you said, Vidal had 4 carries for 11 yards. Yeah, he's not taken over from J.K. Dobbins. And the Chargers aren't going to stop running the ball, especially like you said, Arizona, 157 rush yards, or 153 rush yards a game they're giving up right now, 4.7 yards per carry. Yeah, they're going to give the ball to J.K. Dobbins, and they're going to give the ball to J.K. Dobbins a lot. So I couldn't agree more with this one. Like I said, makes me extremely, extremely happy. I know Lucas, if he was with us, if he didn't have that, terrible accident getting hit by that bus 17 times in a row, he would be, I'm just kidding.
Whoa!
Just kidding. It's a joke.
Lucas, look both ways before you cross the road, buddy. Come on, man.
But I know he would agree with J.K. Dobbins as well. I'm going to go with a running back named Chuba Hubbard. And, I love saying his name. I've kind of knocked on him quite a bit over the last 2 years, just being a Panthers running back. But he's had 15 plus in 4 straight weeks. He's only had 1 game of the entire season with under 18 rush attempts, or in that last 4-week stretch. I mean, he's each of the last 4 weeks, he's had at least 4 receptions, and he's playing the Washington Commanders. And I might be rocking a Washington Commanders sweatshirt and a Vikings hat, but that doesn't mean I really like the Commanders. I just like the sweatshirt. And I got to say, the Commanders aren't stopping anyone on the ground. They just aren't. And I think this Panthers team knows if they want any chance of winning any game this season, it has to start with the ground, because they have to be able to control the clock a little bit, because that defense isn't stopping anyone. They don't stop you on the ground. They don't stop you through the air. So they're going to continue to feed Chuba as much as they possibly can. And like I said, 18 plus carries in each of the last 4 weeks. That is definitely not stopping anytime soon.
This Carolina defense obviously is not stopping anybody, because their last 3 games, they've allowed their opponent to go over 30 points. That being said, though, Chuba Hubbard is still putting up 90 rushing yards a game. And I think 2 of the 3 games, he's gotten 15 or more carries. So it doesn't really matter how far behind Carolina is in their matchups. They are still going to get Chuba the ball. Now, I do want to ask you, if Jonathan Brooks was somehow to play this week, I don't think he will. I think that's probably another week or 2 until we actually see him suit up. But if he plays this week, how much does that change Chuba's outlook for you this week?
Not enough where I'd even move him out of my starts. I think at this point, like you said, he's more than likely a couple weeks away. If he's coming in this week, he's going to be on a snap count. I don't know if you remember Brees coming in last year, that first game back. He even ripped off a huge run, and they still kept him to under 40% of snaps. They had Dalvin Cook, who looked toast running the ball for them because they kept him on a snap count. At best, I think that's what you get from Brooks this week. But Hubbard, he's the running back 2 over the last 4 weeks, averaging 20.7 fantasy points per game, behind only Derrick Henry. So he's second in attempts over that in that span. He's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. So I think there's a lot to like about Hubbard right now. But it's time to get a little more depressing. Talk about some running back sit. I mean, depressing is the wrong word. I was just like not as happy, not as uplifting.
We're talking football, man. There's nothing
I know.
depressing about football.
I don't know what I'm just trying to say, like, we're not excited like we were for J.K. Dobbins to call these guys sits. So I'll just shut up and I'll just let you talk about your running back sit.
I feel like we've talked about a Bengals running back as a sit in almost every starts and sits episode of the year, but we're back on the Zack Moss train again. This time, though, it's a little bit of a different tone, a little bit of a different situation than in previous weeks, because Chase Brown may have taken over this backfield last week. Not just by snap count, right? I mean, Chase Brown did outsnap Zack Moss 33 to 24, but Chase Brown has just been looking like the better running back on his opportunities than Zack Moss in the last couple of weeks as well. Zack Moss, he's bottom 12. I mentioned this stat in last episode when we were talking about our trade targets and our sells. I mentioned Zack Moss as a sell. But again, Moss is bottom 12 in yards per carry of all running backs with at least 10 carries in the last 3 weeks. And it's actually less than 3 yards. And Chase Brown is averaging nearly 2 full yards more than Moss in that stretch. Now, the one thing that was kind of giving some hope for Zack Moss was that he was kind of holding on to the receiving role, that he was still going to be, or that he was more involved in the receiving game than Chase Brown. Over the last 3 weeks, Chase Brown and Zack Moss have the same amount of targets. So it's not necessarily like it's Zack Moss's, responsibility anymore or anything like that. This is now much closer to a 50-50 split than it has in the previous weeks. And my point really is what's stopping Cincinnati from making Chase Brown the 1A now and Zack Moss their 1B?
Yeah, it's gross. Like you said, we've called them sits because it just hasn't been great for either back. They took the Joe Mixon role and split it between 2 running backs, right? Joe Mixon needed the volume to be a good fantasy running back. And now if you're taking it and splitting it between 2 players, they're just not seeing that same volume. And especially if Chase Brown's been the hot hand, this team, like we said, like we were talking about on the trade target episode, this team has no loyalty to Zack Moss. They brought him in as a free agent this year. We'll talk, a little bit about the Rachaad White situation in a little bit, but Tampa has some, loyalty to White. That's why there could still be optimism about Rachaad White. I'm not saying there is, but because they he drafted him, he's been with him a couple of years. Zack Moss doesn't have that same thing. So yeah, this could easily be a game where Zack Moss just barely sees any snaps. And even if he does, I just don't have the highest hopes. He's a guy who hasn't rushed for over 6 yards in a game this year. So unless he falls in the end zone, you're just like, and do I think he's going to if he's fully splitting snaps? No, I really don't see that happening. I did just say we're going to talk about Rachaad White, and that's by a roundabout way because I'm actually calling Bucky Irving my sit of the week. I didn't want to take the coward's way out, if you will, like Lucas did last week, taking Rachaad White. I'm going to take their actual 1A running back, Bucky Irving, right now and talk about him. I get that, he was exciting last week. 18 points he put up. It looks like he's going to be the back. Rachaad White might not play this week, so he's going to get that starting role again. The issue is he's playing the Baltimore Ravens this week, like I talked about with Baker Mayfield. They are giving up 59 rushing yards a game. They have not allowed more than 50 yards to a single running back on the year. They're allowing 3 yards per rush. The next best team is allowing 3.6. So they're just stopping you, at the point of attack. They are the 3rd best team in EPA per rush, expected points allowed, and they have the 3rd best stuff rate in runs. So they just aren't allowing teams to do anything on the ground, and I really don't see Bucky Irving as the guy to kind of break that streak against the Ravens.
So let's do a little name game because our host is not here, so I get to do the name game whenever I want to, so I don't have to participate. Let's start off Bucky or Zack Moss.
Ooh, tie. That's so disgusting.
Oh, I know.
Why is that where you start? Give me a softball.
Layup.
Yeah, geez. I guess I'd go Bucky in that one, but I don't even know.
You don't feel
I'd go
great
neither,
about it.
but I'd probably still say Bucky.
Let's do a couple softballs now. Tank Bigsby or Bucky Irving,
Probably Tank, assuming ETN's out.
and
If
that's
ETN
that's the way it's trending.
Yes.
Kareem Hunt or Bucky Irving,
Probably go with Kareem Hunt.
Javonte Williams or Bucky Irving.
Oh, that's so gross. Especially because half the people are going to watch this after the Denver game tonight, so they're going to completely judge me on either, oh, he's a genius, or I think I'm going to lean Javonte, just because, and that's strictly because of how good this Baltimore run defense has been.
And last one then for you, Najee Harris or Bucky Irving.
You got to go Najee. I think, especially after last week, you got to trust in Najee Harris. So I gotta thank you a little bit for ending it with Najee, right? You built up my confidence by the end, but man, you started me off with just a heater, a heater, Bucky Irving. If you're deciding between Bucky Irving or Zack Moss, I feel you because I'm making that same decision this week, and as you can tell, I'm leaning Bucky, but I'll probably go back and forth every single day until we get to that game. But I'm going to take a second to recalibrate after Ty got the gears moving, and we're going to hear from wow, I can't even talk anymore. We're just going to hear from Underdog real quick.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back, and I think I've fully figured that out, right? I think I have my reintroduction now. My issue is I do this though right after I do it, and then I look for the affection of the people right after.
You look for the affirmation, and
yes,
it's not there.
Yeah, I just right away. But you know what, Ty? I did it 2 episodes in a row. I didn't talk to the 93% when I was supposed to. If Lucas is watching these, he is going to reprimand us for not doing it. But you know who you are if you're the 93% and you've been watching our videos before. We're seeing a couple thousand of you returning to every single video. So I know that you're hearing this message over and over. So don't pretend like you're not. We've told you by now. But the 93% are those who watch our content and are not subscribed. And we just ask you, turn that mouse a little bit, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications because we got 3 podcast episodes every single week for you. And we don't want you to miss any of it because we're going to help you win your league this year. That's our goal. And that is exactly what we're going to do. So like I said, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications so you don't miss anything. But Ty, let's get into your wide receiver start. And I know you're excited to talk about him. So I'll let you just have this one.
T. Higgins. Y'all doubted T. Higgins. Y'all thought, no, he's injured. No, he's not that good. He's way overdrafted. But here's what it comes down to for T. Higgins. The guy is leading the Bengals in targets and receptions since he came back from his injury. It's not Jamar Chase. It's T. Higgins. But Jamar has stolen the spotlight, has stolen the credit, though, because he's posting an outrageous 19.5 yards per reception and 5 touchdowns. But again, if you're looking for volume, T. Higgins is the volume guy here in the Cincinnati offense. And since his return, he's been the wide receiver 15 in points per game. So at this point, why wouldn't you play T. Higgins? I say T. Higgins is a start for me because I think a lot of people will say, ooh, it's a tough matchup going up against Cleveland. But it really isn't. This Cleveland defense is not the same defense of the last couple of years. In Cleveland's last 5 games, they've played Jacksonville, the Giants, the Raiders, Washington, and Philly. All credit to Washington and how well they are performing right now. But if they can go through Cleveland like they did and put up 34 points on them, Cincinnati can absolutely do the same. So I have a ton of faith in T. Higgins. He's been coming through lately. I don't expect that to change this week.
Yeah, it's he last 2 seasons really is kind of been disappointing, and I think people were kind of starting to get to the point of this is just it's just gross now. I don't really want to deal with it. But like you said, Ty, 6, 10, 14, 7 targets in his last 4 games. He's showing, hey, don't forget about me. I'm gonna put up points. I can command targets. His yards per reception is lower. So that is interesting. I think that's why the targets are coming a little bit more. He's almost like the safety blanket underneath, whereas Jamar Chase, like you said, he's the big play. He's exciting. He scores the touchdowns. He's got the flashy name. But T. Higgins is doing enough where he's trying to kind of sneak himself into that Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle when 2 is healthy range of wide receiver 2s again is kind of where he's trying to go. And like you said, we think of this AFC North as these great defenses, but like Baltimore, we said they're weak through the year. Cleveland, they've been weak pretty much everywhere, unless it's Myles Garrett rushing off the edge. So I got to agree. I think T. Higgins is for sure a very good start this week, and he should. There are very few lineups he shouldn't be in. My start is Mr. Jordan Addison, and yeah, you know what? I got the homer take, got my Vikings hat on. The Lions are allowing the most receptions and yards to wide receivers this season. That's what we call a good matchup, right? That's where we want Jordan Addison to be. He's the guy who plays well with Justin Jefferson in the lineup too. Jordan Addison doesn't need to be the one yet. We saw him score 21 fantasy points in his first game back against Green Bay with a rushing and a receiving touchdown. And then we saw him get 8 targets last week against the Jets, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, last time they played against the Jets. Obviously, a very tough matchup. And on top of all of that, the Lions are without Aiden Hutchinson. That is a huge thing for this defense because he is the cornerstone. He is the pass rusher who gets the quarterback to get the ball out early. They don't have another Aiden Hutchinson sitting around. They don't even have a tier down from Aiden Hutchinson sitting around. They got to go a couple tiers down from him. So I think the pass rush is going to be weaker. I think this is going to be a high scoring game between the Lions and Vikings, right? I know the defenses have been pretty good, but Lions and Vikings both given up a lot of yards to the pass. So I'd for sure fired up Jordan Addison in this one.
There was a barn burner last year. So because I think most people would see like divisional matchups and think like, ooh, like that could be low scoring and stuff like that. Minnesota and Detroit is not Baltimore and Pittsburgh, is not Cleveland and Pittsburgh, right? Like this has been a barn burner. This has been a high scoring game. All the more reason to fire up Jordan Addison. And with this Detroit defense being so good against the run, the Vikings potentially being without Aaron Jones, maybe an extra reliance on the passing game. TJ Hawkinson could be back. So that does kind of shift things around just a little bit, but they are weakest on the outside. Yeah, they've got talent out there. They are not a congruent unit that is working together. So I love Addison this week. I think he can definitely have a game this week along with Jefferson.
And like you said, since Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell have both been there, their last 4 matchups have been 20-30, 30-24, 23-34, and 24-28. So every single matchup, they've at least put up 50 combined points. I really don't see that changing in this one, even with how good the Vikings defense has been playing. Ty, let's talk about your wide receiver sit. We've talked about him a couple times as a wide receiver sit. We talked about him also on the Tuesday episode, but I'm just kidding. I'm talking about my wide receiver sit. I'm introducing the wrong guy. We have also talked about this guy, but we did not talk about it on the Tuesday episode. So why don't you tell us about me and Ty were looking at this doc when we went into the break, and I told him I almost did this before because we have it switched around of who's going first, and I did it now. So Ty, I'll just, you know what? I just got to shut up sometimes. So I will do that right now and just let you talk about your wide receiver set.
Yeah, so I've talked about my running back sit, who is also my sell candidate This wide receiver was also my sell candidate, a wide receiver from yesterday's trade targets episode, Michael Pittman Jr. Very much for the same reasons as Anthony Richardson. Except for Michael Pittman, the reason is Jalen Ramsey. So not sure how confident you can feel about a matchup like this with how I don't want to say bad or poor. The passing game has been in Indy with Richardson, but this is not going to be like a target hog kind of game for Michael Pittman Jr. in the slightest. He has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games, so that's been elevating his performances. I'm not expecting that to happen. He has only one game with over 40 yards. Nope, that's passing.
No,
you want to explain that one?
No, it's 40 yards receiving. I just typed the wrong word. That's on me.
I was going to say, I thought that was receiving. Anyway, since Josh Downs over the last 3 weeks has out-targeted and outgained Michael Pittman as well. So I'm not going to sit here and get into a debate of who's the true one or who's the two here. Again, moving pieces, question marks, red flags, whatever you want to call them. I'm not starting many Colts this week in fantasy except for Josh Downs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, we talk about the passing pile all the time. That's really what it comes down to. Michael Pittman's a volume guy. Anthony Richardson in his career, obviously he's only played in 8 games, so it's very small sample size. Only one game with more than 17 completions. Has yet to have more than 225 passing yards in a game. So when you add in the Josh Downs aspect of he's seen almost a 30% target share the last couple weeks, that makes it really hard to say, hey, Michael Pittman has any sort of upside. Pittman's also never had 3 touchdowns in a row. So I'm not going to say, oh, just because he's never had 3 touchdowns in a row, he's not going to find the end zone on this one. But like you said, against Jalen Ramsey, I just don't see that really as something that I'm going to count on this week for Michael Pittman. Now we can talk about my sit of the week. And let me just say, this is who I was trying to introduce earlier. So we did talk about this guy on Tuesday. It's George Pickens. I don't want to pick on Pickens, but it's, it hasn't been great so far this season. We've seen his snap count decrease over the last 2 weeks because of on the field, the off the field issues, effort issues, playing less than 67% of the snaps each of the last 2 weeks, which is crazy. That means they're really, Pittsburgh's really not liking what they're seeing from him because they don't have another wide receiver. It's not like they have Deontay Johnson anymore, who they're saying, hey, Fields, now Russ, you can throw the ball to him. And I know Russ is playing this week, and you might be thinking, oh, hey, they're going to throw the ball more. It'll be, no, I don't really care. Do you remember Russell Wilson last year? It wasn't like he was great last year. It wasn't like he was that much better than Justin Fields. And it's crazy to me that they are taking out Fields, that you can be 4-2 and you're going to a guy who looks like a quarterback that could probably bring you to 8-9 each week. So yeah, I just don't want anything to do from the Steelers aspect. And then they're playing the Jets, who are allowing the second lowest passing yards per game at 150. They're 4th best in EPA per pass attempt. They held Sam Darnold and the Vikings, who had been on fire up to that point, to 209 yards 2 weeks ago. Held Josh Allen to 215 passing yards last week. And on the ground, they've given up 120 rushing yards in 3 of 6 games this year. So what do you think Pittsburgh's going to want to do? They're going to want to run the ball and not throw at Sauce Gardner. That means that George Pickens is not going to see a lot of targets. That means the volume's not going to be there. I just don't want anything to do with him.
If Pickens isn't going to be seeing the targets, we might see an even lower snap count than we've been seeing the past couple of weeks. Because what does Pickens do when he's not getting targets? He gives up.
Yep.
The dude quite literally goes at just 50%. He coasts, which no NFL coach, especially Mike Tomlin, will tolerate. I am going to try to do my darnest to try to avoid starting any the only Steelers receiver you were ever starting in the first place was George Pickens. But I might just be kind of going out of my way to find somebody else to play over Pickens this week, just because, again, matchup situation, it's not pretty.
Yeah, it could be one of those where you're looking at the end of the week and you're going, how did I end up with 4 fantasy points? Well, the fellas tried to warn you. That's all we're saying. Ty, we'll fly through some tight ends. But before we do that, we just want to remind you, we have our Discord. The link looked like it was kind of working, kind of not for some people. We hopefully have fixed that now. So in the description of either the audio podcast or on the YouTube video, the link works to get in there. Over 3,200 strong right now, asking start sit questions. Weekly rankings will be out probably a couple hours after you watch this. Before Thursday Night Football for sure. I should say a couple hours after you watch. No, it should come out right when you do because we release them right around noon, which is when they should be posted. So go in there, get your free weekly rankings. I won't waste
weekly
rankings. That's when I'm making our TikToks. I do that constantly. I have to say that line like 15 times. I'll be like, hit the Discord link on our bio where you can find our free weekly rankings for week 7. I'm like, what the heck? Why can I not talk? And so it's brutal. Just giving you guys the insight on content creation and how difficult it is on us, right? I mean, we just slaving away for this. No, I'm just kidding. We enjoy it. But Ty, who is your tight end start for this week?
David Njoku. You probably were already, but I again, kind of what I had said at the very top of this, of just kind of like, we're back to some normalcy in terms of like who's available this week, just because we only have 2 teams on bye. Last week against Philly, dude had 5 catches, 5 targets. That's kind of the volume that you got to chase here with tight ends at this point in the year. And especially when we've got guys like Tucker Kraft, who's kind of fallen back a little bit. Dallas Goedert picked up a hamstring injury, but he also now has A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith back. There's still a lot of volatility, a lot of fluctuating finishes for these tight ends that you just kind of, even though it feels gross and it's not substantial enough, right? 5 receptions, you don't get super excited about it. You do kind of have to just kind of follow it here. So, yeah, fire up Njoku this week. And probably the biggest point that somehow I avoided all the way up until this point, he's the wide receiver 1 in Cleveland now because Amari Cooper isn't there. I don't know how I didn't lead off with that, but I hope that was maybe already known. If not, Amari Cooper is in Buffalo now. David Njoku is the best weapon in Cleveland right now.
For sure. And Amari Cooper, 53 targets so far this season. 7th in the NFL, is now just gone. Those targets have to go somewhere. Unfortunately, Amari Cooper is only catching 50% of those, less than 50% of those targets. So I'm not saying they're going to be accurate or well thrown, but Njoku will at least get targeted due to the absence of Amari Cooper. So hopefully, we can kind of see Njoku really come into what we saw at the end of last season, where he was pushing the wide receiver 1 over the end of the year. My tight end start of the week is Evan Engram. And surprise, surprise, we're going to chase the volume at the tight end position.
Hey.
I will say for Evan Engram, at least, this does feel a little more sticky than when we're talking about the Hunter Henrys, when we're talking about Ty's K-Dot, which I got to give you credit for, Ty. It wasn't as terrible as me and Lucas thought it was going to be. What did K-Dot end up on the week last week?
Doesn't matter. It was gross.
But anyway,
it was 2 catches and a touchdown.
Hey, touchdown though. Found the end zone. That's all you can ask for. Evan Engram had 140 targets last year, right? So he's going to see targets again. You're just hoping that he can do similar to what we did last year. Patriots allowing the 7th most yards to tight ends. It's a matchup you want to target. I would be all in on starting Evan Engram this week, especially with the tight end landscape, how it is as it is.
Chase the volume. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, it feels gross because it's a Jacksonville player and they're not doing well, but at the same time, again, the dude got 10 targets. Like, that's more than what most tight ends are getting on a weekly basis here. So chase it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all you can ask for. These next 2 tight ends, we don't spend much time on our tight end sets. We didn't even bring in film for them because we're going to just spare you from really monologuing on them. So Ty, why don't you give the people your tight end set for this week?
So over under 40 and a half seconds for how long this will take me to explain my set.
All right.
Tyler Conklin, low hanging fruit, absolutely, but I really don't care. The guy had 6, 8, and 9 targets before this past week against Buffalo, and he only had 3, caught 2 for 10 yards. And now they just traded for Devontae Adams. No, thanks. Move along.
Yeah. You should have said 20 seconds, not 40 seconds. You were under 20. So congrats.
I was really hoping you would have taken the over. I was really hoping, even though I knew deep down that there was no chance I was going to go over, but.
Oh, beautiful. My tight end sit is Tucker Kraft, the guy we've been talking about. Last week, he only had 4 targets for two receptions, 13 yards. If you watch back to that Rams game, the only reason it was a really big week, he broke a tackle, had a long, turned a gain into a long touchdown. And now he's playing Houston, who's the best team against tight ends on the season. And they're allowing 2.6 receptions and 21 yards per game to tight ends. So, yeah, I want nothing to do with Tucker Kraft in that one. Well, that wraps it up for us. Hopefully, we have put you in the position to win week 7. If you don't think we have and you need to make a move, check out our trade targets video from yesterday. Ty mentioned 2 of his sells on this video. One of my sells was on this video as well. I'm not going to tell you who it is.
It was Michael Pittman. I know.
Well,
because I went back.
Oh, all of our sells were on this episode. My running back sell is on here too. So craziness. But make sure you go check out that video to see who you should be trading for, who you should be trading away. But like I said, we have 3 podcasts coming out each week. So make sure you are subscribed. Turn on those notifications for this one. If you want to follow us on the social media, I'm at Camel FFF on the X. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath. I am just struggling. If you want to follow the fellas over there, FF Fellas on the X, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook, or you can follow Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts if you are short form on Facebook as well. Make sure you give us a follow, and we will see you next week. Good luck and deuces.
Deuces.